just a sense of being a music student, whether you're a music major or an engineer major or a nursing major, is such an incredibly special way to learn how to be a thoughtful person.
Welcome to Women We Should Know with international speaker, mindset reset mentor, author, and your host, Leslie Michaels. With audacious honesty and candor, the Women We Should Know podcast presents the wisdom and life-empowering insights of women who are the embodiments of innovation and social evolution. Please join Leslie as she shares potent conversations that will inspire your personal and professional evolutions.
Well, I am thrilled to welcome you back today. As you know, those of you who tune in regularly, and for those of you who don't, you'll get to learn now. Women We Should Know is rooted in a commitment to bringing the voices, the extraordinary accomplishments, the audacious actions of women that you may not know about into our podcast rooms so that you can hear their voices, you can understand what it is that they are doing to make this world truly better. It has been my long belief that it is up to the women to make the big changes. And now a lot of other people are catching up with me. Of course, if you stay on the planet enough decades, that does happen. So as we move forward, we're going to get to hear all about Angella's story today. She's a violinist, major violinist. She has performed in every state in the US and over 30 other countries. As a member of the On Trio, and we'll get to hear more about that, she has played in venues as diverse as the White House, that's prestigious, the Jazz Dock in Prague, Vienna's, oh gosh, can I say this? Okay, I can't. We'll have her say that. New York's Lincoln Center, Beijing's Concert Hall, a palace in Istanbul, and TED Women. In addition to live performances, Angella has 9 enthusiastically received albums with her trio. And she has done collaborations with modern dance companies, film directors, rock bands, and DJ Spooky. New York Newsday called the trio classic revolutionaries. I kind of love that a lot, don't you? Angella enjoys living in Bozeman, Montana, where she is currently associate professor of violin and viola at Montana State University. And she is so skilled and has such talent with helping the next generation of young musicians that she has become a devoted and sought after teacher and was named Most Valuable Professor and Professor of the Month. She's been featured with musicians Daryl Anger, Emmylou Harris, now that's somebody from my day, and John Prine, that's somebody from my day too. Just lost John last year. She can be seen in The Hive, a film production by Tippett Rise Art Center in collaboration with the acclaimed sculptor Stephen Talasnik. Oh, I'm having trouble with some of these names today. And director Matthew McKee. Now, we're going to be talking about this. This is one of the most outrageous things I've heard in terms of mixing mediums of the arts. I am so excited to have Angella with us today and to be able to introduce her to all of you. Welcome, Angella.
Hello, Leslie. It's so wonderful to be here.
It is wonderful to have you. I have many things that I can't wait to hear about and to have the audience hear about, including the Hive. But I kind of have this little tradition. I like to ask all of my guests in the beginning, what is the one thing on your bio that you would love, or excuse me, that is not on your bio, that you would love people to know about you?
Let's see. I would say the one thing that people may not know about me, that's not in my bio, that's not really related to my career or what I do every day, is my obsession with food.
Mm.
I think that's it. And perhaps this is kind of a national obsession as a Korean. Food is extremely important to all of us. But my sisters and I grew up with our mother, who is an artist herself when it comes to food. I mean, she's also a writer and she's
Ooh.
very artistic and very creative. But her cooking and her passion for food is quite well known among our friends. And it's just and that's it. I always say if I didn't play the violin, I would have been a chef, a food critic, a food writer, someone that has something associated with food.
You are singing my song. And how do I get on your mom's guest list? Because honestly, all forms of Asian food are at the top of my go list.
Yes, I know. Well, the way to my mom's heart is by eating not just your portion, but two, three, four servings, and then you will be her favorite person forever. She will always feed you, but you have to make sure that you eat more than humanly possible.
I'm in. I can do it. I'll just be sure I have the next day off so that I can lay around and moan at what a wonderful meal it was and how much I moved into excess.
Yes.
Speaking of your mom, when we met, you were talking about coming from a long line of strong women.
Yes. Yes. Um, I truly believe that I am who I am because of the women in my life. Starting with my maternal grandmother, who grew up in North Korea. And
Oh my.
yes, and her parents wanted to marry her off to a much, much older man that she obviously didn't know because marriages were arranged back then.
Mhm.
And she really, it was not something that she wanted to do. And I believe with her parents' blessing, my grandmother, she left. And maybe it has something to do with, in those days, you would have, the family would save face by, saying, well, my daughter ran away or whatever. You couldn't
Right.
just maybe deny the marriage. But my grandmother, what happened was she left the North, went to the South, went to Seoul, and stayed. And just a few years after, the Korean War broke out. So she never saw her parents or her immediate family again. But I think about that courage. And she was quite young. I think she was only in her late teens or something like that. And finding work and finding her ways. And she eventually met my grandfather. And then my mother was their oldest daughter. She has two younger brothers, but she was the only daughter. And again, my mother she was very successful in her schooling. She was one of the first women in South Korea to visit the White House, which was the Blue House. It's called the Blue House in Korea, and be in a journalist for sort of the government office and things like that, which was really uncommon in her time. And
Sure, sure.
she met my dad, and things didn't go exactly the way that she wanted them to go, but she ended up taking three young girls, myself and my two sisters. We were only 9 and 11 years old, to America by herself. I mean, and she was in her 30s.
Oh my
Can
gosh,
you
you
imagine?
are from strong women.
I Can you imagine a woman in her 30s with three little girls, taking them across the ocean? So I think about that quite a bit, in who I've become, who I am, the choices that I make.
Oh my gosh, that's impressive. I come from strong women. I love stories of coming from strong women.
Yes.
Yes. And in terms of the whole your mother and your father, I know you said that being bicultural really shaped your life and gave you a sense of independence and building a backbone in a certain way.
Yeah. That's another huge aspect. When you are raised in one culture and then you move to a different culture, and they're not similar in really very many ways. Where I come from, Koreans, and this is why my mom and my grandmother are both so remarkable, because we, from my culture, from my childhood, is more about conforming
Mm,
to your family, your society, being less having your own voice, but more respecting the society, the bigger
mhm,
group. It's really, um, it's not that your own opinions aren't encouraged, but I think before you can have those, you're really expected to fit in more than anything else.
mm,
And then my family moved to America, and it's, for me, it's kind of the opposite. It is all about
right.
um, having your own voice, having independence, having very strong um, beliefs, and kind of working towards them. And so, growing up in those two cultures and being able to pick and choose the
Mhm.
ones that you really want to make part of you. So, I love the importance of family in my culture. I love bringing that into my more independent Western culture. Um, my mother, like I was saying, didn't have the easiest marriage, and she had given up so much of her career to marry my father and raise us. And
Mhm.
so that sense of, well, when I'm older, I'm going to make sure that I'm independent,
Right.
I'm self-reliant, I'm capable, that I can take care of myself and not have to rely on anyone. That was always very strongly stressed
Mhm.
in um, in me and my sisters. And so, sort of putting all of those things together and forming, as you get older, kind of the right things that you choose for yourself. I think that's hugely a part of that whole bicultural growing up.
Oh, I can't even imagine, but you've done amazing things. Amazing things. Your mother obviously blessed you with great tenacity that
I
she
believe,
got from her grandma, from her mother. My
yes,
goodness,
yes.
going from the north to the south. You spoke about, having your own voice and being able to have your own opinions. And it called back to mind something you said in a different conversation about the fact that you tend to speak more through your violin than you do through words. And I found that lovely. And how does that manifest and how does that feel for you?
Every musician wants their instrument to be their voice.
Mm-hmm.
We want, when I play the violin, I want the violin to sing, I want the violin to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, coming from um, a different native language, it's really interesting, because although my Korean is fluent, it is not like other Koreans that living in Korea. We left the country when I was 9 years old. I turned 10 as soon as we moved to America. So it's that sort of more childish Korean. And then
Mm-hmm.
when we moved to America, I was young enough that I can really immerse myself in speaking English. And it was quite easy for me to learn. But again, it's not the same as a native English speaker. And I
Right.
think about this quite a bit. And so the violin for me is the language that I can speak with
Mm-hmm.
no difficulty whatsoever. Every nuance, every emotion, every that I want to convey, every tiny little thing that I want to say, if I can't find the words, I can absolutely say it on the violin. And that is the magic, I think, of playing an instrument or speaking an instrument, or playing it for so long that it becomes a part of you and part of the way you communicate.
Oh, that makes such sense. And how long have you been playing? When did you start?
Um, I started when I was 6.5 years old.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, you couldn't keep my attention for 2 seconds when I was 6.5 years old.
well, and
You
if
were born with discipline, obviously.
I'm not even sure if it was discipline, but I think it was just true love.
Ah, yeah.
You
Well,
know,
that will do it every time.
and when we were growing up, the TV culture wasn't really a big part of Korean children.
Mhm.
And my father was a businessman, but my mother, like I said, she's a writer, she's a journalist. She was the more creative part of that marriage, and so she wanted to make sure, even though she didn't play an instrument, that she brought her girls to every concert, every museum, ballet galleries. It didn't matter if we didn't understand it. She just really wanted us to experience it. And I actually have learned, or, recently, that part of it was that she was in this slightly difficult marriage. And this was kind of a way for her to go and do things without,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
um,
Of
uh,
course.
without difficulty. So um, that was
I'm
part of it.
doing it for the girls.
Exactly. Exactly.
Moms are so creative that way.
Yes, and she's really a super mom. And so we just loved music. And I'm saying we because all three of us, my sisters and I, we just loved it so much. We wanted to play all the time. Um, and it just became a part of our lives.
And that brings me to the trio.
Yes. Yes. So it is difficult to talk about me without including my sisters.
Yes.
They are such a huge part of my life. In fact, when I first moved to Montana 10 years ago, it was the first time that we weren't living, even just a couple miles from each other, because we
Mhm.
were all at school together. All of us were at Juilliard. And even when we weren't living all together in the same apartment, we were literally living few blocks from each other. And then, of course, as soon as we graduated, we were traveling all over the world together. So it's just
Right.
a huge part. And so I think we have a slightly different relationship than your regular siblings. It's
I'd
also
say so.
right,
Yes. In
and
fact, in some cases, you could say just the fact that you have a relationship is different than some siblings.
maybe. And what's interesting too is I think this also filters in, which is we're so close in ages. My sisters are just under 2 years older than me, and they're twins. They're identical twins. And so the three of us being at the same schools, being in a career together, being a trio, traveling together, um, we have become almost inseparable.
Mhm.
In fact, one of the most fascinating things for me during COVID was that all of our concerts stopped, in
Right.
for the first time in 20 plus years, because we were literally performing even before we left school.
Even
So
before you left Juilliard.
exactly. So it was very interesting. My sisters and their husbands all came to Montana, kind of fleeing New York. And because it was just so much safer here, we
Mhm.
can be outside all the time. And it was the first time, I would say, in pretty much our entire lives that we were just being sisters, not a trio,
Oh,
not having a working relationship, not talking about programming or where we were going or what we needed to do, but just being sisters. And it was the most remarkable time. It it was
So it didn't destroy the trio.
no, it was.
I'm kidding.
I don't think the trio can be destroyed. No
That's
matter
wonderful.
how hard we tried. But it was very, very special and unexpected just to have that time. I mean, they were here for months and months and months. They didn't leave.
And did mom come?
Mom came. Everyone was
Oh,
here.
that's beautiful.
It was remarkable, and being together for I mean, mom actually stayed for over a year, but even with my sisters, they were here, I think, for about 4 or 5 months, and being all together for that long without work playing in to that time or that relationship, that it was more special than I can even describe in words. It was really remarkable.
I'm sure, because really, although you weren't yet professionals, from when you were 6.5, so they would have been 8.5. Music has been the center of your relationship for all intents and purposes, your whole lives
Many
until
decades.
now. Yes, yes. Had they been to Montana or actually spent any real time in Montana before? How did they like, and how did they respond to such a vast, open, natural world compared to New York?
Right. Well, it was very interesting because, as I was saying, we've always lived together or in very close proximity. So when I left New York City 10 years ago to move to Montana, it was shocking to my family. You can imagine. It was absolutely shocking. They could not understand it. They just they were almost angry. I think they were actually mad. And
Yes.
so
You were abandoning them.
exactly. You don't
Because
do
there
that.
is that kind of abandonment thing when somebody else goes their own way.
Yes. And we had never gone our own ways. We were always together.
Right.
And so then they saw how happy I was, and I was thriving in Montana, and I was finding my own voice, which has, like I said, it has always been so important to me. And they would come sometimes to I don't even think they've been once just to visit, but for playing concerts, sometimes we would
Sure.
play in various parts of Montana, often in Bozeman, and they would come for a few days, and they thought it was nice, it was beautiful, they enjoyed it, but then they were, ready to go back
Get
home.
me back to the city.
And they said, after being here for 5 months, we understand.
Uh,
We understand why this is feeding your soul, why you love it so much, your community, the beauty of the space, and just everything. They completely understood. And so that was the other really special thing that happened is,
yes.
Montana became not just from, well, this place that our sister abandoned us to we get it. It's a very special place. So they understood for the first time,
Oh,
really.
did that just feel amazing to
Yes.
have them get that?
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So happy. Yes.
Yes. So I want to go back to your solo career. Speaking of you having your independence,
Yes.
I am fascinated with the idea of the Hive. Could you tell all of us about that experience? What was the Hive? How did that come about? What happened with that?
Yeah. Um, so like I was saying, coming to Montana, and finding my own voice. And I love playing music with my sisters, but I also crave sharing music with other people and exploring music on my own,
Mhm.
and, just things also away from my sisters. And
Mhm.
so I've been very involved in so many different things in Bozeman, Montana. And so I was lucky enough a few years ago to get a call from Peter and Kathy Halstead. They have this incredible um, art center called Tip It Rise. And
Mhm.
it's a 10,000 acre working ranch, but it's also an art center. And I mean, you drive up to it and there's a Calder sculpture. I mean, it's just the most remarkable place, and it's surrounded by the Beartooths. And if you haven't been,
I
you
haven't
must go
been.
next time you're here. But they had contacted me, and I'd gone there to do some small projects, which I was really thrilled about. And then they called, I think this was 3 years ago, and said, we have Stephen Talasnik, a very well-known sculptor who's already had some works at Tippett Rise already. And, you know, he has several works at the Storm King. I mean, his works are everywhere. He's world renowned. And they said, he's going to build a special sculpture for us inside the barn, which is their main indoor music venue, called the Hive. And we would love for you to work with Stephen and create a solo violin performance
Oh
around
my,
the sculpture.
did that just blow the top off your head?
Yes. And it was thrilling, you know, this idea of, okay, so we've, you know, the trio has collaborated with different artists, but nothing, this was so unique in, you know, really doing one sculpture with one instrument. So I got on the phone with Stephen and we had a long conversation about what kind of music and how we saw the evening play out. And so we, kind of worked up to this idea of, Stephen said, well, you know, what would be so cool is I would love to see the Hive kind of coming alive. So maybe, you know, for half of it, you can stand in front of it and play the selections that we kind of work on together. And then for the other half, maybe you can start inside the Hive, the sculpture, in the dark, like completely black. And then as the music progresses and it intensifies, there are these lights around the sculpture that kind of get brighter and brighter and brighter. And then it gets fully bright. And so we had this whole idea, and I
Oh
remember
my
I
gosh, it would have been insane to be able to be
do
there live and watch and hear this performance.
I know. And Peter and Kathy really wanted to keep it intimate. So it wasn't, you know, a lot of people. I
Mhm.
can't remember how many, maybe 30 or 40. And I know my friends that were there are still in awe of that
I'm sure.
experience. And for me to play in the sculpture, around the sculpture, and we selected lots of music. I played some Bach, I played some Mark O'Connor, I played Kenji Bunch. There's a child, you know, a friend that I've had throughout the Juilliard years, and just a huge composer in my career, and my sisters, the trios as well. But we ended up playing, or picking rather, this one Kenji Bunch selection. And what happened was, after the performance, it was so special. And Stephen he had all along had thought where he's going to build this sculpture inside the barn and then actually break it apart and burn it, because it couldn't live in the barn.
Mm.
Um, and it couldn't live outside because it was made with bamboo shavings. So it was something that had a lifespan. And then Matthew McKee was actually there because my sisters and I were doing a project with Tippett Rise, and we made another film called The Sisters. And that's also quite special. But Matthew said, we should film the Hive. Then the Hive can live on. So we
Oh,
chose
brilliant.
one selection from the concert, which was a Kenji Bunch piece called Aria for solo violin. And this is something that he actually wrote when we were in school. And it's just haunting and beautiful. And we filmed it so that the film could live on.
That is amazing. And installation artists have always fascinated me.
Hmm.
To put so much, I mean, who will ever forget the gates at Central Park?
I know. I remember that so vividly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who will ever forget these amazing works of art that, and then they're gone?
Yeah.
That
Right.
I think there has to be a different kind of approach to ego and art to be able to not need it to exist
Yeah.
forever.
Can you imagine? That would be like writing a book and then burning
Burning
it.
it. Well, no, as you know, I'm at the end of writing my book, and I would fight grizzly bears to keep that book out of the fire at this point. My
Right. I know.
ego's not there. The book's going out into the public. So, but I just am fascinated by installation artists and the idea of you getting to take that piece and weave the music into the bamboo shoots and into that whole configuration of the hive, and then to turn to ash and go into the earth. And then I get very esoteric and I wonder about that energy and how it's going to inspire people in a different way in the future. But that's
Right.
a different conversation, probably.
Yeah. But the other really special aspect of the sculpture itself was because it was made of bamboo shavings, and they were, it was almost like they were moving, although they weren't. But there was this sense of movement while the bow
Really?
was moving on the violin. And it was, I don't know. I mean, it was just something I felt, and the few friends that came to the show said that they also felt it, even though I'm sure it wasn't actually moving, but it was almost like there was this feel of movement, and it was spectacular.
That is spectacular. And of course, your amazing music would have allowed everybody to have that sensory experience of music.
Hmm.
So that's incredibly beautiful. What big event or big symphony or big palace have you not yet played at that is still in your sight line?
Oh, wow. Well, I have not played in the Disney Hall in LA.
Mm.
That would be quite spectacular. But honestly, Leslie, it's interesting because for me, it's not even about so much the kind of important big venues or
Mm-hmm.
if it's more about the history of the place and the connections that we make with the audience. So I could be in a small chapel that
Mm-hmm.
seats 30 people,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be the most incredible experience.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, I would say even now, one of the most incredible places that I've felt like I can't believe I'm here playing,
Mm.
is, for example, Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires. It has such history,
Mm-hmm.
and being there and playing music, or inside the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul,
Mm-hmm.
and playing at this church that was built 2,000 years ago or something like
Right,
that.
right, right,
So it's
right.
just, so it's more like those kinds of experiences for me that get me just have goosebumps, like, what did I do to deserve this life where I get to be here making music?
I suspected that would be your answer. I knew it wouldn't be something frivolous. It would have to be something with some deep roots and some historical meaning. And that's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. What about this next generation of young ones who you are helping to
Mm.
encourage and shape and inspire? What do they see for their potential? What do they see for their future? That they, some of them are just going to want to play for their enjoyment and their own family's enjoyment. But what can we look forward to seeing come out of this current generation of young students?
Yeah. Well, that has is such an important part and has become such an important part of my life as well. Um, Having these students at Montana State University and being able to share my Dorothy DeLay, Ivan Glamian sort of violin pedagogue, coming from generations of really important violin
Mhm.
teachers and performers, and being able to share that with this next generation is, I'm so grateful for that, because I think about this all the time. If I were teaching in New York City, for example, there would be so many other violinists that could
Right.
teach what I teach, because there are so many graduates from Juilliard and Manhattan School and Mannes School of Music and Columbia, and I mean whatever, and um, and so I think about what I can do with the students here, what kind of an impact I can make, what I can teach them. And what I love is that, you know, beyond even a specific line of violin teaching or music teaching, is just a sense of being a music student, whether you're a
Mhm.
music major or an engineer major or a nursing major,
Mhm.
non-music major of any
Mhm.
sort, is such an incredibly special way to learn how to be a thoughtful person. So
Mm.
when you play music, you're listening all the time, you're thinking about the details, you are sharing, you are you have to be a detail oriented person, you have to be a good listener, all of these kinds of skills. You have to be disciplined, you have to be able to you have to have patience,
Mhm.
so all these things kind of help you in whatever you do in your life. If you
Of
become
course.
a writer or a teacher, a doctor, anything, or lawyer. So that's what I think about a lot when I teach. I also think about what the young generation is experiencing now,
Mm.
and I mean, all of the difficulties of the world, but also kind of not having as much time with books and recordings and the kind of research that we grew up doing. So
Right.
they look at the computer and they Google, and their social media, and they're kind of fed the things that they're interested in. So I worry about that. And
Mhm.
um, I just hope that the next generation can um, really find ways to do their own research, their own thinking, their
Mhm.
own, really digging in,
Mhm.
rather than just relying on Google and Facebook and, things like that. So
Absolutely.
but I think, the wonderful thing about music is that it actually almost forces you to do that. You can't play the violin on the computer. I mean,
Right.
you can do it, but you can't actually, you have to hold the instrument. You have to
It's a
look at the music.
visceral experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I wouldn't have put the pieces together that the thoughtfulness and the the listening and essentially the grace
That's
required
nice.
to
Yeah.
learn to play violin. I hadn't thought of it in as an overlay in respect to how it will affect their humanity. I love that you brought that forward because, of course, it would. You can't just saturate yourself. Saturate's the word I'm looking for. You can't saturate yourself in a world that requires that much attention and that much peace and
You
grace
know,
and attentiveness and not have that bleed out into the other areas of your life.
Absolutely. And Leslie, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially sort of in the current climate. And, we're getting, it seems so much more divisive, and
Oh,
people getting, people are kind of losing their listening skills.
Yes.
And so imagine, my absolute passion is chamber music. And
Mm-hmm.
in chamber music, what is chamber music? You're sitting in a room with two, three, four, five people.
Mm-hmm.
You're not speaking, you're
Nope.
speaking with your instruments, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to listen to each other.
Mm-hmm.
You can't argue, you have to be respectful, you have to be patient, you have to listen. So imagine a world if
Mm-hmm.
every politician and every people from different parties, they were forced to sit in a room and play chamber music.
From your lips to the universe's ears, honestly.
So wouldn't that be amazing? It would
That would
change
be,
the world.
it would change the world. Honestly, in the year of COVID,
Mm.
what I missed most was the performing arts
Mm.
as
Yes.
a supporter, as a patron of the performing arts. That was one of the that would go right at the top of my list. And um, so many people I encounter in the world in what I do have never participated.
Mm.
And I can't even imagine that. But to take politicians,
Right.
or let's take a step beyond that, let's force the lobbyists
I love
to sit. Oh, I could get wicked on that path, so we'll not. But one thing I did want to ask you about these students and about your life and your experience as a whole. Now, of course, you have your sisters, you have the trio. So there are three women right there. But how are women experiencing being able to be in the world, being invited to be in the world, being included, being not included in the world of uh, great classical music at this
Mm.
point?
Well, I think we are really lucky. I think about that in my generation, um, in my society, in my time, that as a woman, I can play in a symphony orchestra if I want to. I
Mm-hmm.
can be a touring musician if I want to. Um, I it's I've been thinking about this actually quite a bit because I just read this remarkable nonfiction about this extraordinary woman by the name of Leah Loboshetz. And she was a Jewish violinist living in Russia in the 20th century
Ooh.
when the Jews were being persecuted. And she, even though she was one of the most brilliant musicians as a child, she almost didn't get into Moscow Conservatory because she was a Jew and she was a woman. And
Mm,
she, the book is called The Nightingales Sonata, and
I'm writing that down.
it is the most remarkable story of persistence and passion. And I mean, I'm so inspired. And so I think about her life, living she came from a very poor family. And she ended up through perseverance, through hard work, um, uh, becoming one of the most well-known internationally touring violinists in the 20th century. And that was
Wow.
unheard of, uh, almost unheard of in her generation. And she eventually became a teacher at Curtis and moved to America. And this is a wonderful music conservatory in Philadelphia. And so she influenced many, many generations of musicians. But I think about her life and growing up, and when I win a competition or I get invited to a concert, I can just go, I can just play.
Sure.
But for her, she had to fight for
Right.
every single thing that she did. And she had two siblings, actually, a cellist and a pianist. So they were playing in a piano trio also. And they were invited to, this is how remarkable she was, they were invited to play at the memorial service for Tolstoy. And they ended up, you know, being with and knowing and having friendships with every important Russian writer, musician, artist, and they were just this huge presence in that world. But I've been thinking about that a lot, because I think, wow, I can do anything I want. You
Mhm.
know, 30 years ago, maybe 40, I'm not sure, but you know, women couldn't even play in a major symphony orchestra. And we think about that time, like that wasn't that long
I
ago.
was going to say, now that is in the course of my lifetime. In fact, that's in the course of my adult lifetime. So
Right.
yes, it's crazy. And that's why I wonder, because, well, as you know, as everybody who's known about me for 2 seconds knows, everything I do is focused on women and uplifting women and helping and being and creating platforms and voices. And um, and we are in such painful disarray in this
Mm,
country right now. And I wonder about those those generations, several behind me.
mm,
What is it that they're going to do? I know we are, as humans, we are survivors. I mean, look at what we've survived for thousands and thousands of years. But survival is not fulfillment.
right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, how many do you? What type of percentage of females do you see coming into professional music at this point?
Well, I feel like more than maybe other fields,
Wonderful.
you think about the finance world,
Right.
or other kinds of non-artistic worlds and businesses. I think it's still more male dominated, but luckily in the arts world, and especially in the music world, maybe
Hmm.
because playing music really calls for that the very sensitive, the very feminine. I don't know.
Right.
But I mean, I'm not saying that men can't be in the music world, but I do think there are many women in my field and just thriving. And I am lucky that my world is like that.
Yes. As we're getting ready to close out, I just have to ask, is it music and being a professor that brought you to Montana? Did the land bring you to Montana? What brought you to Montana? I have this curiosity in my head.
Oh, well, maybe neither. um but certain maybe music is more a part of it. I actually met my ex-husband in Bozeman playing a concert.
Oh, well,
Yep.
love is always in there somewhere.
So yes, love more than anything else.
There you go. There you go. Thank you, Angela. And I want every one of you listening to know I'm going to have Angela's link to all of the trio's um, published recordings. We're going to have a link to the films that she has been in. We're going to have a link to her mailing list so that you can keep track of what she is doing. And who knows what other wonderful treats we're going to throw into those program notes for you that you're going to be excited to discover. So be sure and go to the website, hit subscribe, hit leave a comment. We'd love to know what really inspired you through this conversation today. And again, Angela, it has been so much fun to speak with you. I love the arts. I love speaking with artists, and I am on your mom's dinner invitation list.
Definitely. Thank you
uh,
so much for having me. It was so fun.
so fun. I hope all of you out there got some great nuggets, great insights, or some great inspirations. Any of the above will do. And as you go about your day, I'd just like to remind you you are smarter and wiser than you know.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you received inspiration for expanding your own social innovation and influence. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at lesliemichaels.com/podcast. For more tips, insights, and support in creating a fully audacious, professional, and personal lifestyle you love, visit our Women We Should Know community on Facebook.